Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host, Dusty O'Connell, returning after a brief unscheduled vacation. Joining me from the cold Omaha studios in what I assume is Minneapolis, Minnesota, is generally useful human, Minnesota Vikings blogger extraordinaire, and now I guess you can add like Norse Code host to your resume, although I don't know why you would. Arif Hassan. How you doing, Arif?
You're recording on your end, so that still makes you the host in a user sense, and then also you're the one driving the show, so that makes you a host in the show sense.
Oh no, but you, I'm just saying that now you have done that as of last week.
Oh no, that's true. Yeah, I guess I did that last week. That's weird, isn't it?
That was weird. Although it was a good show. I enjoyed it. I was sorry to hear about your car. Getting your car towed is always super lame.
It's brutal. I'm really glad that I got this raise here at Zone Coverage and spend all of the additional money on getting my car back.
Does your car have a name?
Not anymore.
No. What?
It's the car's fault, Dusty.
What does that even? Oh, wow. All right. The worst thing to me about getting your car towed is how if there's anything, like if you have any property in the car, you can't have it back until you pay the impound fee and release your car.
I think that should be illegal. I think that's
super
ridiculous. Yeah.
Which I imagine they count on. Otherwise, if you have my crappy car in your impound lot and there's nothing in it, then that is way less of an emergency than if my phone and my wallet are in it.
Right. There's so many people that would give up on their $500. I can get a better car for $500. That they would give up on that car if it wasn't for the fact that for some reason my music collection is all in CDs because it's 1998. I need to get all of that now.
Right, my car is worth $500, but the textbooks inside are worth $1,200.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, they're worth $1,200 this semester only.
Right.
And then their
bookstore you get $4
collapses to approximately 3 McDoubles and a stick of gum. So we had initially planned on doing a show on Saturday night in the event that the Vikings traded up to the first round. They did not. They traded up in nearly every other position, but not to the first. So we remain on our approximately regular schedule, and we will break down. You and Ben kind of whiffed. I mean, I guess nobody expected Dalvin Cook, but in terms of players and positions of need, you guys kind of swung and missed. So we have a lot to talk about this week. But we'll.
I don't remember any of the players that we talked about, so I believe you when you say that we completely whiffed.
There was a lot of Joe Mixon.
Oh, thank God. Yeah.
I remember a lot of that. But anyway, we'll talk a couple other personnel changes and then take a look at a brief, but I think interesting mailbag. I think we got some good email questions this week. But I did want to take a second before any of that and mention that Norse Code is brought to you by you, the listener. Well, I mean, me and Arif too, but you. If it wasn't for the contributions that listeners like you have made, and we actually have 2 new contributors this week. Hooray! We wouldn't be able to do things like purchase a MiFi for Arif to take to training camp so he can podcast and file reports from a hotel that has generally terrible Wi-Fi, and things like a website and podcast hosting and microphones and all the things that go into making the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. So thank you to everybody who has contributed in the past. And this week, Stanford Evavold contributes at the $3.50 level on Patreon, which is actually our literal favorite way for you to contribute to the show. It makes it easier for us to plan throughout the year when we know that you're making a small monthly contribution, just the price of 1 latte to keep the lights on here at Norse Code. And you can do that by going to patreon.com/NorseCode. If you would like to make a one-time contribution in any amount that you would like, which Brian Kellner did. Thanks, Brian. You can go to paypal.me/NorseCode and pull the trigger on maybe a one-time donation to support your favorite, my favorite, and maybe Arif's favorite Minnesota Vikings podcast.
Definitely my favorite. I didn't know if you were putting me on the spot for me to like answer that, or you were just going to let that go. But it sounded like I needed the answer. Yeah, definitely my favorite.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Anti-Luke Arif football machine. But I much prefer this one. I'm sure that'll get back to them.
Well, it is it is your playground basically here. You know, we give you free reign to pontificate as you will about all things Vikings.
Yeah, it's the only one where we spend maybe 20 minutes a show just talking about food. Because why not?
It's true. I think the only way you would like it more is if I did not correctly hate Star Wars.
I don't understand. Whatever. That's fine.
So we lost a guy. I don't know how big of a deal it's going to make, but Brandon Fusco has been traded to the San Francisco 49ers.
Was he traded? I think he was just cut and signed.
just cut and picked up. Yeah. We didn't get anything for him. But I mean, Brandon Fusco is functionally done, right? Like there's not a whole lot of value left to.
Yeah, I don't think Niners fans are particularly optimistic either, especially because, any signing post-draft, you're, resigned to having that person exist, but not, like, contribute. So, Niners Nation reached out to me. They're like, could you give us a scouting report on Brandon Fusco? And I was like, I don't know if you want that. I think you'd prefer the mystery.
He has 2 arms, 2 legs, and a heartbeat. And
so
he
I wrote
would be
up
at
the
training
scouting
camp.
report. And I checked like a couple hours later in the comments how people were like reacting to the scouting report, and generally no one was like upset at what I wrote. They were just upset that Brandon Fusco like dared to sign with their team, which maybe that implies that my scouting report was a little too harsh. But at one point in my scouting report, I was like, here are his strengths and then here are his weaknesses. And as like to summarize his weaknesses, they are technique, movement, and strength. And someone quoted, oh, his weaknesses are technique, movement, and strength. His strengths are that he occupies physical space. He's composed of molecules. I was like, yeah, maybe I could have worded that a little bit more. Whoops.
Equally good when moving as not.
So, yeah, the Vikings lost former All-Pro quality 2013 guard, Brandon Fusco, to the San Francisco 49ers, who are probably not getting the 2013 version of him.
No. One other, I guess, well, this isn't really a news item. It was a cause for panic momentarily as, I guess Peter King, got Teddy Bridgewater and Sharif Floyd confused for a second or something. That has to be what happened, right? Because
that's the prevailing theory. I remember reading in the Twitter replies to his original MMQB article, because, why not entertain yourself that way? And someone said that he confused Teddy Bridgewater with Jalen Smith. And I was like, I have no idea why that would happen, but, sure, maybe. Either way, it's clear that Peter incorrectly reported on Teddy Bridgewater. And the incorrect report is thus, that Teddy Bridgewater suffered significant nerve damage as a result of his injury, and his nerves were not regenerating. That is a huge deal. If that was true, that would be it. That would be a career ender. We would have an open and shut case on Teddy Bridgewater. His nerves are not regenerating. That's what that story would be. But a couple hours later, I want to say, because MMQB is always like really super early in the morning. I want to say a couple hours later, the article was changed to is injured and has not recuperated. Which is like, yeah, we know that. That is already extant information. There's no new information. Because all he was doing was providing context for why the Vikings didn't offer Bridgewater a 5th-year option, which we can get into in a second. But mostly, this just means that Peter King badly mishandled the story, and there's not even a correction on the website.
I know, they just went in and changed the offending paragraph without issuing a retraction or a correction or anything, just oh, whoopsie. That's
And so like a lot of bloggers, so like Chris Gates, for example, at the Daily Norseman, I think he lives in Germany, lives on a military base, I think. And so he caught this when it was published because it was like 5 a.m. here and it was noon whatever time in Germany. I don't know how time works. It was lunchtime or whatever. So he caught it right away, published it. It's on the blog. So this morning when I'm going through the Daily Norseman, I see this story. I'm like, oh, Jesus. And Matt Wenzel replies to the Daily Norseman tweet, Chris Thomason, whatever. Someone replies to the Daily Norseman tweet. He's like, well, I'm looking at the story right now. There's no nerve damage indication in the paragraph that you're citing. And then Matt Wenzel responds, I think, to Chris Thomason was like, it was originally there. And I was like, Jesus, this is a clusterfuck. That's there. Like, wait, how could you mess that up and then not even issue a correction? Because, like, a lot of aggregators will pick that because, like, it's in the part of this insanely long article, which I know is very difficult for someone who writes articles like I do to say. But he's got, this weekly column, this incredibly long article, and like the stuff that's like breaking news is like right in the middle of it. Like, so the thing about these MMQB articles, which I'm sure most of you already know because you are all football fans, is that the first portion of an MMQB article is just like a regular feature article in a newspaper, right? That you'll see every week. And then there's like another like half feature article. And then there's the 10 things and so like, somewhere in the middle of that is stuff that's like really important league news that is just in the middle of the article. And then after that, he like ranks coffee that he had that day. Like that's the article. That's not even a joke. I think that's inaccurate. He ranks coffee at the end of all the articles, or beer or both. And so you go all the way through. And so like all these people who aggregate like news have to like, scroll all the way down, see this friggin' alarming paragraph about Teddy Bridgewater, and then they push it out. So it goes on PFT, it goes on Roto-World, it goes on like the Vikings blogosphere, and then they just like quietly change it without telling anyone. That's amateurish, man.
Well, it's so funny to me because in the world of internet publishing, as I'm sure you're aware, there's a lot of pressure to, if you're going to break a story, be the first to break it and, get it out onto the news aggregators, make the splash. So when you do make a splash and it's like wrong to the point of being silly, then I feel like in this case being Peter King does not mean you don't have to say you're sorry.
Exactly. It's the opposite of falling in love.
All right. I think we have a show title.
That's good. No, that is good. Our show title is half-ass backwards reference to a movie from the 70s. All right.
That's, as is our want.
Yeah, right.
Vikings pick up the 5th-year option on Anthony Barr and not on Teddy Bridgewater. And not because of the nerve damage thing. This is pretty standard, right? Like we expected this to happen. We expected both sets of news to hit. So I mean, there's obviously a risk with every 5th-year option. There's obviously a huge risk when the Vikings picked up Matt Kalil's 5th-year option. And then, of course, it like actualized itself in this like gargantuan $11.5 million guaranteed contract. So the risk with the Anthony Barr one is like pretty obvious, right? He was really good in 2014. He was phenomenal in 2015, and he was kind of butt in 2016. And so, there's like some risk being like, well, if he is in between those two things, he's certainly not worth the $12.3 million that the option is worth, right? Like if he's like average or even just a little bit above average, he's not worth $12.3 million. But you're going to be on the hook for it because it becomes fully guaranteed on the 3rd day of the league year. And you're not going to cut an above average linebacker even at $12.3 million because, that's like you're putting Anthony Barr on the market. That's way too much of a risk. So, yeah, that's a small risk, but I think that for the most part it was a pretty good move by the Vikings to pick up the 5th-year option, and it was the expected move. Like any other move would have been, frankly, shocking unless it came with like an immediate announcement of a contract extension, which is another thing about the 5th-year option is that it gives the Vikings room to negotiate a contract. So you can exercise a 5th-year option and then
negotiate a contract before that fifth-year option becomes, real. The thing with Matt Khalil, of course, was that any contract that the Vikings wanted to extend was always going to be worse than this fifth-year option. So Khalil was like, no, I'm just going to wait. You can either cut me and we'll have that discussion, or I'm going to make $11.5 million. And he called their bluff. With the Vikings, the reason they didn't pick up the fifth-year option, and when Tom Pelissero announced it, he even included the phrase had nothing to do with nerve damage, right? No nerve damage. It was, just because, there's two reasons, or three, I guess. The first is that there's an enormous injury guarantee in the option. So it becomes fully guaranteed on the third day of the league year unless that player is too injured. Then it's just fully guaranteed. It's an injury guarantee, right? And so you don't want to commit yourself to that with, obviously, the issue that you have with Teddy Bridgewater. So there's that. The second reason is you still give yourself an option to negotiate a long-term contract that we just discussed. And so, picking up or declining a fifth-year option is not the end of your relationship with the player. It's just it just means that you're not going to commit yourself to whatever I think was $13 million that the Teddy Bridgewater contract was going to be. And the third reason is that the Vikings actually still have the fifth-year option on the table if Teddy Bridgewater starts the season on the physically unable to perform list, the PUP list, and then misses the first 6 games while on the PUP list. If that happens, his contract tolls to the next year, so he gets essentially a 1-year contract extension in 2017 terms. And those terms include the fifth-year option, which would then, of course, be a sixth-year option, but by language, it's called the fifth-year option. And so the Vikings will get it once more. So if Teddy is on the PUP list for 6 games and then is practicing for like 2 weeks and then is activated for, the final 8 games of the season, then the contract tolls and you've got a fifth-year option. You're good. So, yeah, there's a really smart move by the Vikings to not exercise that fifth-year option.
Yeah, it leaves pretty much every door open for them. And I'm curious to know what you think. I'm of the mind, and I blame a lot of things that happened last year on this, but I feel like Barr had a down year last year because he was surrounded by the 2016 Vikings, and I feel like even at the price we're paying, he could have a lot of upside for the Vikings next year.
I don't know if I entirely agree that Barr's down year was entirely due to the supporting cast that he had around him. It would have been nice if there was an actual, 3-technique defensive tackle in front of him. But Eric Hendricks got a lot better and stuff like that. I thought that Barr just made enough of his own mistakes. But I think that generally speaking, your conclusion is correct. That there's just a much better chance that he's going to be good than he's going to be bad. Significantly better chance he's going to be good than he's going to be bad. So, yeah.
Well, let's talk draft now that we've lived through that process. After you and Ben Natan spent a couple hours talking about mostly Joe Mixon and cornerbacks, the Vikings traded up to draft someone who was not Joe Mixon and many other players who were not cornerbacks.
I find it so fast because it's clear that the Vikings have a cornerback depth problem. One of the reasons, if I'm recalling that show correctly, one of the reasons that we decided to skip out on a lot of the other kind of conversations were because people were pretty familiar with the offensive linemen or whatever. And I wanted to talk about the cornerbacks in the second and third days because that's when I figured the Vikings would end up shoring up the depth problem that they have there. They, of course, did not. So they ended up drafting a guy in the 7th round, Jack Tocho, which Chris Thomason is reporting is actually going to be a safety. So, no cornerbacks. I'm also a little skeezed out by seeing this insanely good safety class and then getting a guy who nobody had on their radar as a safety and just being yeah, that guy, that's our safety. What you had what are you doing? But yeah, no, the Vikings grabbed Dalvin Cook. They traded up to get Dalvin Cook instead of, I guess the other option was to stand pat and get Joe Mixon. And I'm a little curious about sort of what the conversation inside the draft room was or the conversation beforehand was. So we know that a lot of times, the Spielman in the front office will evaluate a player based off of their playing ability. And then the coaching staff tries to figure out, whether or not the player's character is such that, they'd want to avoid them for football reasons or whether or not they could have the ability to fix them or whatever. And then there's like a final cross-check essentially with the Wills, right? Where the Wills essentially get to make a final say on a player that might be polarizing for whatever reason. And so I'm kind of curious sort of if the Vikings had Joe Mixon on their board, how high they had him on their board, whether or not, Zimmer signed off on him from a character perspective, and whether or not if Zimmer had signed off on him, whether or not the Wilfs allowed it. So like those are the kind of the interesting discussions to have around that. But it's all hypothetical. We can throw it away because they got Dalvin Cook, who I think is maybe Christian McCaffrey's a better running back. But if not, Dalvin Cook, I think would be the best running back in the class. I think that he's better than the number 4 overall pick, Leonard Fournette. I think that he's more versatile. I think that he can do a lot more things. One of the things about Fournette, and I know we want to talk about Cook, but by contrast, one of the things about Fournette that's really frustrating is that he's not particularly talented at running in zone schemes, and he's not particularly talented at running out of shotgun. Dalvin Cook is very good at both of those things. He's also good at running out from under center. He's also good, and this is supposed to be a knock on him. I don't think it's true, but from what I've seen, he should have the physical skill set to actually be also pretty good in power /man /gap running schemes, where he has to hit a particular hole. I think that he's good at all of those things. He's also a pretty decent pass protector. He's not like Ezekiel Elliott level pass protector, but he's a pretty good pass protector. And he's a pretty good pass catcher. He's not like David Johnson or Joe Mixon as a pass catcher or Christian McCaffrey as a pass catcher. But he's got pretty good hands. He just needs to become a better route runner. So I think that he's a multi-capable back who has the ability to play on every down. He scored quite a few touchdowns for Florida State, and he's always a threat to create big plays despite, some iffy combine workouts, especially in terms of explosiveness. So those are the things that you get with Joe Mixon, which is really nice. And then when you have Latavius Murray, who, despite not generating very much power, even though he should for his size, is still an effective goal line back for whatever reason. He scored, kind of a lot of touchdowns for the Raiders in goal line situations. So even if you don't like Dalvin Cook from the perspective of his size, and of course you don't really expect Jerick McKinnon to be a goal line back, you do have that option there on Latavius Murray. So I think that the Vikings, really excellently wrapped up the running back position, which they hold in much more importance than I do, but is still nice to have. And I think that it was a good pick because anytime you can get a player who's like top 10, top 15 at pick 41, I think that, barring a wealth of talent already at that position, you do it.
We were talking a little bit before the show started about how you think, and maybe the league is kind of trending away from having, an Adrian Peterson style back, a guy that gets, 25 carries a game, and, more of a running back by genuine committee, like less big name power back and more, 2 and 3 running backs sharing responsibility, sharing the load. It seems like Latavius Murray, Jerick McKinnon, and now Dalvin Cook would be a pretty dangerous combination if that is, like, if you are going to make that strategy change. Those seem like 3 guys that would be a very good fit for each other. Does that sound right?
Yeah, no, I think so. One of the exciting things about McKinnon is that they've been essentially grooming him to be a guy who has the ability to perform from the slot, and we haven't actually seen him run a ton of routes yet, but he's a guy that is capable of making plays in space. They kind of want to turn him into Darren Sproles, and while he's not there yet, he certainly has sort of the skill set within him to do all of the Darren Sproles-y things. And then, of course, you've got Mixon, kind of an all-around back who maybe has, and I'm not sure that this is, capital T true. It's more speculative based on, his body size. Maybe is not going to be the most effective goal line runner at the next level, but you have a guy who's proven to be an effective goal line runner in the NFL. And so they all can serve different functions. What's nice is that, remember those sets when Adrian Peterson and Jerick McKinnon were on the field at the same time? those sets are still available to you with Dalvin Cook, and I think that you can do a lot with them. You can either have split back sets, you can split back motion, Jerick McKinnon out into the slot. You do all sorts of things to create mismatches and generate offensive versatility in a way that doesn't necessarily put extra stress on your offensive line. So yeah, no, you're right. This is like we were talking about how the NFL is moving in a direction where you've got less value on individual running backs, more value on having specialized roles for them or a variety of roles to fulfill. I think this fits within that perfectly. So within the confines of the Vikings being a running team, the Vikings have still advanced as far as their understanding of the way a running backfield should be designed.
And in the third round, so if we can say that the Dalvin Cook pick is both the best pick in terms of best player available and position of need, in the third round, in a draft not known for the strength of its center class, the Vikings trade up again and draft who is widely believed to be the best center in the draft, Pat Elflein.
Yeah, I think there were only two good centers in the draft. It was Ethan Posick and Pat Elflein, and I think that Elflein was a pretty good pick. I think that Vikings fans in general kind of overrate him. I'm a little bit worried about his capability of holding up in pass protection by himself, and I think that that's something you have to work with going forward. But I think that despite his size and despite, what some people would call lower body explosion concerns, I think that he's been a phenomenal and still a good run blocker. And I think that as a center, his ability to identify, front fours, front sevens, identify defenses and adjust the run game to those defenses, as well as somebody who is, aware in terms of stunts and blitz pickups and so on. I think that he's a very capable center. So I think that, the Vikings began to address the depth along their offensive line with a guy who's played guard in the past, has played center in the more recent past, and I think can play both of those positions at the next level, although I'd probably want to keep him at center just generally speaking. And I think that, it was also a smart move that the Vikings traded up to get. I think at that point, Ethan Posick had already been drafted. So I think they grabbed the only other good center in the draft, and that's pretty important. And what's really nice is that this marks this pretty significant change in the Vikings drafting philosophy. And I think it's a change born out of, a history of results that's been pretty poor, because the Vikings had not drafted an interior offensive lineman since Rick Spielman arrived. And, some people would say Ryan Cook was drafted in the second round, but I think he was drafted to be a right tackle, if I remember correctly. They moved him to center. So, you take a look at all of like Travis Bond, Jeff Baca, Joe Berger, John Sullivan, David Yankee, all of these guys, Brandon Fusco, all of these guys were drafted in the fifth round or later. And maybe I shouldn't have included Joe Berger because he's a sixth round pick from Miami. But I think Spielman was actually in Miami when Joe Berger was drafted. So maybe that counts. So, this marks a pretty significant change. The first interior lineman that they've drafted in the Rick Spielman era, either as a general manager or president of football operations or whatever his role was way back in 2005, in outside of the fifth, sixth, or seventh round. So that marks a pretty significant change, and I think that that's a good thing because it means that they can actually target some proven talent and not have to rely on getting one every year and then hoping that one turns out, because if you hit just a small string of bad luck where a couple don't turn out, now you've got a huge depth problem because you're not always going to find John Sullivan's or Joe Berger's.
So in the fourth round, the Vikings reached down to pick up defensive tackle Jaleel Johnson before reaching up to pick up linebacker Ben Gedeon.
Yeah, that was a pretty phenomenal move to get Jaleel Johnson. I thought that, so the Vikings said at the end of day 2, so at the end of round 3, they traded essentially they traded down 5 spots from their spot, which they had already traded down to. They traded 5 more spots to get the second pick in the 4th round, I think, if I'm remembering everything correctly. And they told the gathered media that, we had more than 5 players on our board, so whatever happened, we were going to get a player that we wanted. That was pretty cool. So I was asked, sort of at the beginning of that day and then also at the end of the prior day on like a Facebook Live event that we did for Zone Coverage, who are the Vikings going to draft at the second pick in the 4th round? And it's really easy to do a mock draft when you only have to account for one team, right? It's the Packers. And I was like, by far, the best value on the board, if you don't account for like red flag issues like Caleb Brantley has a pending assault charge, by far the best value on the board is Julio Johnson. And if they don't get Julio Johnson, I guess Desmond King, but I would prefer to get Julio Johnson because there's just no defensive tackles worth taking after him at the 3 technique spot. There's some decent 1 techniques. I think Dalvin Tomlinson had already been selected by then, but there was like Vincent Taylor, Elijah Qualls, a couple of 1 technique defensive tackles that are all right. But I think Carlos Watkins had already been selected. I'm not sure about that one. But there weren't really 3 technique defensive tackles after Julio Johnson. So I was like, you should target that guy because he is a second-round talent. I think he's a mid-second-round talent. And so that's who the Vikings got, and I'm very excited. He can play 1 technique or 3 technique. He's very strong. He's been stout against the run when he's been asked to anchor. He does have some weaknesses. I mean, he's not super athletic. And that's what's kind of interesting about the Vikings draft so far, including Ben Gideon. The Vikings didn't really draft that many, well-tested athletes. Dalvin Cook didn't test well. I think Pat Elflein passed some athletic measurables, but he's not like the most athletic center in the draft. Danny Isidora didn't draft well. Julio Johnson didn't test well. Julio Johnson didn't test well. Ben Gideon didn't test well. Bucky Hodges tested, through the roof, but talking about like a 6th-round pick. So that's kind of interesting. And I think Julio Johnson's the perfect example of a player that doesn't test well, but plays so explosively that you have to consider him like an interesting threat as a pass rusher. And what's nice about him is that he's been productive. Like he displays some aggressiveness. He's been over-aggressive in terms of pass rushing. He gets ridden through the arc and stuff like that. But for the most part, he's been pretty good. I think his 7.5 sacks are the second most of any true 3 technique defensive tackle in the FBS. Carlos Watkins is the only other one with more. If you include, people who play defensive end and defensive tackle like Solomon Thomas and Jonathan Allen, then they have more. But for the most part, Julio Johnson is one of the most effective pass rushers at the college level. He did some great stuff, and I think that he can play both of those positions. And if he corrects his aggressiveness or whatever, or at least his awareness while he's being aggressive, he's good because he's normally a very smart player, and he has a variety of counter moves and pass rushing moves in his arsenal. I think he can be pretty effective. So I thought that was a really good pick for the Vikings, who definitely haven't needed the 3 technique spot because we don't know if Dayton Jones is going to turn out there. And, of course, you've got the Sharif Floyd problem. And it gives them sort of better run defense. Then Ben Gideon, he's a guy that I thought the Vikings maybe got poor value out of drafting, and I would have. And so one of the things that Spielman said that is true is that there wasn't very much depth in linebacker in this draft class. And there was more depth at guard. That's true. But I would have preferred the Vikings stood pat and grabbed a guard. I think some of the guards I still liked were available at that point, and then waited a little bit on linebacker, even though the depth calculation is a little bit different. But Ben Gideon is a very good player. He's just not good at the thing that the Vikings might ask him to do the most. So he's good at this very specific 2-down role of stuffing the run, squeezing lanes, playing strong, diagnosing, but he's just very poor in coverage, and he's very poor at getting to the edge. And so when you've got 2 athletes at linebacker, and Eric Hendricks and Anthony Barr, that's not a huge problem about, in terms of the edge, but in terms of coverage, it's a big problem. You could get burned by crossing routes and stuff like that. But he's really good at being this 2-down linebacker. So he's going to provide value for the team. I just think that, maybe he was overdrafted. Still, amazing personality. He's hilarious. You just go through his Twitter feed. It's super funny. His Twitter banner is super funny. I'm kind of looking forward to covering this guy.
So then we get to the part of the draft where the Vikings were sort of like stockpiling picks, right? Like it seems like the theme so far has been, find the best player in a thin class at, whatever position in this draft. And then, it appeared that there were, numerous players at positions of need in 5, 6, and 7 who were, we don't have to go through every single player, but who are your like top 3 late day picks?
Oh man. Bucky Hodges for sure, I think, is maybe the top of those. I understand why he fell. If you take a look at sort of what quotes from NFL scouts were saying, there was like a pretty good chance that he was going to fall. So people had him as a third-round pick. Well, okay, so the best way to characterize him is that they played him essentially as a receiver of Virginia Tech, and he had poor hands. Okay, well, what are you getting out of this guy then? He wasn't a particularly crafty route runner either. So if he's essentially playing receiver, what are you going to do? But I think that, Spielman made the point that they weren't really, playing him in position. They weren't asking him to run tight end routes. They weren't asking him to, block in line. And he's got a lot of physical capability to do those things. And so it isn't that difficult to envision training him up to do those things. So I think that, generally speaking, the Vikings got an athletic project in Bucky Hodges who nevertheless should be able to contribute pretty quickly just because of his ability as a red zone threat. He's super athletic, and I think that his ceiling is through the roof. He's not like a dumb player or anything like that. He's very physical, especially at the catch point, and so he should be able to provide some value as a third tight end that has the ability to be a multi-capable tight end given the right coaching, because I think that that's what they were kind of trying to hit on, was that he's the super athletic guy who's got a bunch of touchdowns, but who has all of these problems in the specific role they asked him to play. Maybe it's because, they didn't get him to play a variety of roles where he could actually be more valuable than where he was used. And, they went to him a lot at Virginia Tech anyway. Like, he's got a surprising percentage of his team's touchdowns and yards, despite the fact that, they've got Isaiah Ford and a pretty good run game. So I think that that's maybe my favorite pick on day 3. After that, I'd have to go with Elijah Lee from Kansas State. He was a guy I was kind of primed to not like that much because I thought he was kind of overrated. But as a 7th-round pick, I think he's phenomenal value. It's kind of like Control Brothers last year, where a lot of people had him as a 2nd-round pick, and I really disliked him as a 2nd-round pick in terms of athleticism, in terms of production relative to his athleticism and defined role, and what have you. But, in the 4th round, he was really great value. And I think he's proven to be that already, given, his special teams capability. I think the same thing is true of Elijah Lee. A lot of people had him in the 4th round, and I was kind of not feeling it because I thought that, he overran plays too often. He wasn't great with tackling angles and what have you. But as a 7th-round pick, he's phenomenal. First of all, he's actually a pretty good special teamer. Both Ben Gideon and Elijah Lee have significant experience in special teams. I think Ben Gideon played on all 4 special teams units for 3 years. Elijah Lee also has pretty significant special teams experience in the same way. He's athletic, and so you can do something with that. You can, make him a weak side linebacker who has the ability to cover. He can cover pretty well. He's done a pretty good job of that at Kansas State. He just didn't rack up that many tackles for loss. It was more. So one sort of, it's not a great statistic for evaluating linebackers, but it's one to sort of maybe get an idea of the way that they're playing the game. If you take a look at tackles for loss versus tackles or run stops versus tackles, you can get an idea of a college linebacker's ability to get to a running back in time for him to make a difference. And I think that was one of the problems with Elijah Lee, is that he didn't get that many tackles for loss or that many run stops, but he got kind of a lot of tackles. And so, that's a pretty good indication that there's some likelihood. It's a good indication that there's some likelihood. So I'm, using probabilistic language here, that, he wasn't this demon of a run stopper or, had the ability to diagnose and then cut through the traffic well enough to be an effective run stopper. And so I don't think he was a very good 4th-round pick, but he's a great 7th-round pick, not only because I think that he's got a better chance than most 7th-round picks of just making the team, but also being able to contribute on special teams right away. So he's my 2nd favorite pick for the Vikings in day 3. And then the other ones, I'd have to choose between like Danny Isidora, who I don't like that much, Rodney Adams, which I thought was maybe the worst pick the Vikings made, Stacy Coley, who is maybe a decent value pick, and then 2 guys I kind of like, Jack Tocho and Ifedi Odenibo. The pronunciation guy said not to pronounce the G, and so I'm going to not pronounce the G in Ifedi Odenibo. I think that his full name, Ifedi Nochaku Odenibo, it's a mouthful. I like him for that reason. But he was also pretty productive. He produced the 2nd most sacks in school history, 23.5. 10 of them came in his final year. That's at least interesting. And I think that he's an intelligent player who has a plan of attack. I'm a little bit worried that his measurables aren't great. He had a 7.263 cone. The Vikings try to get people just a hair faster with the 3 cone. They usually get it below 7.2 seconds. So, for example, Brian Robinson, I think, is 6.89. Daniil Hunter, 6.95. Scott Crichton, 7.19. Everson Griffin, I think, was 7.25 on the dot. So that's close to that. But he doesn't have like the other sort of athletic measurables that kind of match up to somebody who's as explosive as like Everson Griffin and stuff like that. So his athleticism isn't as amazing as like, when the Vikings drafted Stephen Weatherly last year. They always get an edge rusher. They usually get a force player. Efedi Adenibo is not that. But I think that he's productive. I think that his final year film is kind of useful. It's kind of cool. And I think that he is that's kind of how you have to evaluate 7th round draft picks. I think that he's got a better chance than most 7th round draft picks of providing value to the team. So I'd pick him over someone like Jack Tocho, who is smart but is not, very fast. They're converting him to safety, which means that they don't have an answer at cornerback. So yeah, that's my evaluation of the 11 friggin' draft picks they made.
I know I ended up with so many. But, it seems like a pretty solid draft. Like we were able to get maximum value out of a lot of picks late in the game.
Yeah, I think so.
So looking at the undrafted free agent roster, we have 13 players, of whom 8 or 9 of them are probably camp bodies?
Well, I think that generally speaking, if you sign 13 undrafted free agents for the Vikings, that means 12 of them will make it to camp, and one of them is going to be cut for a tryout. So it's going to be interesting to see, who that is. And then out of the 12 of them that'll make it to camp, I think, 3 or 4 will make the practice squad, and then 1 or 2 will make a good push to make the roster. So that's maybe a good breakdown of that. 2 people to watch out for are defensive end / edge rusher Deshaun Bauer, who the Vikings valued a lot. They gave him the highest, sort of signing bonus out of all the draft picks, $15,000. And it's the second highest out of anybody in UDFA. The highest, of course, being a guy who was offered an actual $100,000 as opposed to $30,000, whose name I already forgot, but I retweeted it onto my feed. I'm sure you can find it if you want. But Deshaun Bauer's kind of interesting. He's athletically, again, not amazing. He's got marginal career sack production, but, he's a guy that has a lot of, I want to say, athletic potential, because he's athletic. The problem he has with his athleticism has to do with his flexibility, and so in terms of his bend and 3 cone times and stuff like that. But he's fast and he's extremely strong, and so I think that you could do something with him. The other guy is Caleb Kidder from Montana, who actually has an amazing 3 cone time of 6.91 seconds. Fits kind of the athletic measurable trend of taking those guys. He's got a quick first step, and he kind of knows how to use his hands. He just needs to get better defending the run. So those are 2 guys I'd keep an eye on. And then the other guy I'd keep an eye on is, I think you pronounce it Avion Collins. It's spelled Aviante Collins, but Avion Collins, tackle out of TCU. Him and Deshaun Bauer were the 2 guys on the consensus draft board that the Vikings signed that were above, rank 300. And Avion Collins is he's extremely athletic. So we're talking about these guys that have some dimension of athleticism, either explosiveness or speed or flexibility, but not usually all 3 of those things. And I think Avion Collins has all of those things. He's very fluid. He's very quick. He's explosive. He's got a lot of athletic ability for a 300-pound offensive lineman. And he combines all of that with something that the combine doesn't test all that well, which is balance. He's got good recovery, and he locks on well in pass protection. So, and he's a guy that's also strong. And so he's a guy that's going to be kind of interesting. Some of the measurables don't measure out. He's got short arms, small hands, and in his recovery often includes grabbing a guy. And he didn't get flagged for it in college, but he would be flagged for it in the NFL. And just generally speaking, he needs more technical coaching. But I think that, as opposed to someone like TJ Clemmings or Babatunde Ayigbusi, Babs, I think that the level of technical coaching that he needs to do well is significantly less. And then you don't have to teach him foundational things. You just have to teach him, just generic offensive. Like, you don't have to teach him like what the 5 basic steps are in run blocking. You just have to teach him how to take those steps a little bit better, or you have to teach him to keep his hands up. And you don't have to teach him, how to gain depth quickly in a drop back. You just have to teach him like in what order you're going to do things and how you're going to have your hips. Like, his flaws are much more correctable. I think that he's a draftable prospect. So he's a guy that I kind of like out of all the undrafted free agents. Otherwise, in order of guys ranked on the consensus board, which might mean something in terms of their ability to make the team and contribute, Josiah Price, a tight end from Michigan State, wasn't super productive, but he's made a lot for himself, and he's got a ton of touchdowns for a tight end, and I think he's the school leader in tight end touchdown production. So he's going to be interesting to see if they can turn into a red zone threat. Eric Wilson, linebacker out of Cincinnati, he didn't see the field all that much. He's a will linebacker who, he seems like a guy who plays small and slow, so he could be like a Kentrell Brothers. He's not very strong, but he's pretty instinctive. You've got Dylan Bradley, who is statistically an extremely excellent like pass rushing defensive tackle. Out of all of the guys ranked in Pro Football Focus's pass rush productivity, he ranked 7th among defensive tackles. So I think that he's going to be interesting, but he's 269 pounds. So the question is if he's going to stay a defensive tackle or become a defensive end. Wes Lunt, not a very good quarterback, but among the not very good quarterbacks that were not drafted, maybe the best of the not very good quarterbacks. He's kind of small for a quarterback. He is overwhelmed by pressure, and he's not very accurate. So that's cool. He has a decent arm for a guy his size. RJ Shelton, small, reliable receiver, really low drop rate, can probably do a bunch of underneath stuff. Terrell Newby, really well-balanced running back. He's got a lot of power for somebody his size, and I think that generally speaking, he plays like he's a big running back in a small running back spot. We'll see if you can do anything with that. Sean Washington, a linebacker who is, again, also very similar to Kentrell Brothers, but his size is probably going to prevent him from doing much. Nick Fett, tackle Iowa State. He's going to be a guard. Honestly, they list him as a tackle on the website. He has issues getting to the second level. He's got athleticism issues in general. And he's got a lot of strength, but it's difficult for him to utilize it because he loses leverage a lot. He's got very good awareness. And then the final two are Horace Richardson, who they also gave a pretty significant signing bonus to. He's just constantly injured. So he had 2 back-to-back ACL tears in college. But in his final year, he was statistically very interesting. He had 14 pass breakups as well as an additional 6 interceptions. It was difficult to get past him. He did have some problems after the catch in terms of tackling guys. And so, that's probably going to keep him maybe off the roster. And then Sam McCaskill, another defensive end out of Boise State. Poor measurables, but at least he's got better sack production than Caleb Kidder. 6.5 sacks in the FBS versus 5.5 sacks in the FCS. So, he's probably not that interesting to watch out for. I wouldn't be surprised if he was one of the cuts that, was changed out for a tryout. But he's kind of an open-ended book. There aren't many scouting reports out there of him, and I didn't take the time to bother watching him. So those are your 13 guys.
And that is the 2017 draft for the Vikings. So I don't know. Mailbag is mostly draft-related stuff. Should we take a whack at it? Well, actually, we got a couple of email questions first. One comes in from Stanford, from Sierra Vista, Arizona. New Patreon contributor, which I don't want to say necessarily that giving us money is a good way to get your questions read on the air, but giving us money is a good way to get your questions read on the air.
It captured our attention.
Exactly. You have our full attention. Stanford writes, we already have the answer to question 2. Seeing that Adrian Peterson's value is seeming to plummet, What team do you think will finally end up signing him, and how much will they overpay for his services? I think, obviously he signed with the Saints for about the amount of money that we thought would be reasonable when we discussed it last time on the show.
Yeah, I think his contract might be $3.5 million, and we were arguing $3 million, so they overpaid him by $500,000.
So yes, 15% is the Adrian Peterson name value bonus. Not a Vikings question, but who has the best chance to be this draft's Russell Wilson or Dak Prescott?
This doesn't have to always be one.
Yeah, there isn't really one, is there?
Yeah, well, I don't think, were there any mid-round quarterbacks besides C.J. Beathard? I suppose I could look, but that would be the requirement for that sort of thing, wouldn't it? So let's take a look. So Wikipedia has like all the friggin' draft picks sorted by position. Take a look, scroll all the way down to quarterback, and I see if there's anybody I like in the mid-round. So early day 3, I guess, is what we're looking for. So Davis Webb, C.J. Beathard, Joshua Dobbs, Nathan Peterman. Those are rounds 3 through 5. I'm going to go with Josh Dobbs. I like him. He is a rocket scientist in like a very literal sense. That's what his degree is in. He is athletic, and he's in a good situation with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So it's him.
Well, that was easy. And finally, Teddy has always had the boyish face that makes him seem like he's everyone's friend. But if he were to grow a thicket of facial hair in line with that of Darrelle Revis or Samuel L. Jackson in Black Snake Moan, that's an obscure reference. How much sooner will his leg heal? How much will it increase his arm velocity? And would there be a need for Madden to have an update to add a Moxie score?
A lot. Yes. Right? His leg would go faster, a lot faster.
Instantly, probably.
Yeah. He would increase his arm velocity, so yes. And then obviously Madden would have to adjust for the fact that there's a player with Mox and you don't have a stat for Moxie yet, so you just got to update it. I was thinking like a James Harden style beard for Teddy. I think that'd be really funny.
Just like sticking out under his helmet.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Luxurious. John Belk writes in, to go with Arif's 3-year look back at board performance, what if Arif and maybe other Norse code draft people like Ben Natan, Justice Mosqueda, and I don't know, some of the other guys put together a list of who they would have taken with their team's picks, and then each year you could look back and see how their draft is looking. Do you guys I imagine you're probably so embarrassed with your historical prognostications that if you still have them written down somewhere, you probably won't let them see the light of day.
I exposed people who went into my direct messages and were like, "Oh, who did I have ranked where? Where did I screw up the most?" After I published the piece on who did the best job ranking players in the 2014 draft, people were like asking me like, "Oh, I don't even remember my board. Like, where did I screw up or whatever." And that was so like it was cool, kind of cool to embarrass people, I guess, in private with that. With like their like worst takes. Like, well, this is one that he'll own to, so I'll just say it publicly. So Kyle Crabbs at NT Scouting had like Mike Evans ranked 123rd on his board, and everyone gave him shit for it at the time, and now you might as well give him shit for it now. So there's that. I think that the problem with that approach is not that there's any theoretical issue with it. I think that it's kind of a fun exercise. I think the problem is all of the draft people have done so much work for the draft, and then the draft happened, and they did so much work during the draft that now it's just like, whatever. And I don't think people want to do that kind of work. Like they have to double check to see who was on the board and see, who they would have taken out of the people that were on the board. And you'd have to adjust for the fact that we now know how the board fell, so we knew which, positions would have depth after. Like, so like, for example, Spielman makes this pick. I've got the draft up in front of me, so I can actually answer this question about Ben Gideon. Spielman makes this pick, organized by pick, of Ben Gideon because there's not that much, linebacker depth in the draft. And to his credit, Jalen Reeves-Maybin and Samson Ebicum went like 6 picks later, right? So there's 2 linebackers immediately went off the board after that. But I wanted a guard. and the guy I wanted, Nico Siragusa, went 2 picks afterwards. And I would much rather have Nico Siragusa at pick 120, and they got Danny Isidore in round 5, right? Let me take a look for that. They got Rodney Adams around 5. Oh gosh. Oh, no, Isaac Asiata went around 5 too. Take a look for Isadora.
Yeah, he was round 5.
Yeah, he was round 5. And so instead of that, now you're looking for a linebacker. And admittedly, you've got fewer linebacker options, and maybe they take a linebacker at the Rodney Adams spot. It doesn't really matter because no linebackers were selected between Rodney Adams and Danny Isidora. But the guys you have available then are Ukemi Oligwe, who's all right, Tanner Vallejo, who's all right. But the guy I probably would have picked would have been Jordan Evans. And I would have been much happier with Nico Siragusa and Jordan Evans than I would have, with Ben Gideon and Danny Isidora, because I think that both of those guys are actually better than the guy. So obviously, you'd expect the guy who went earlier, Nico Siragusa, to be better than Danny Isidora. But I think that Jordan Evans is also a better pick than Ben Gideon. I think that Ben Gideon was a better college linebacker. I think that Jordan Evans is a better pick. Maybe Markel Lee too, depending on where he went. So that's actually the process that you'd have to go. It's just kind of a lot of work to like go back, look at the draft, see who was available, see how the board fell, and whatever. I think it's just mess. So I think that that's the problem. If I ask Justice to do any more work than he does, he's just gonna. Justice loves being lazy, and he ends up doing like only the amount of work required of him. I think he wouldn't do it. And then Ben has just been swamped with like dealing with Eagles stuff. So I think this just be a little bit too much. But I like the idea. I just think that the practicalities of it make it very difficult to execute.
So if someone else agreed to like process that information for you, would you open your books for them? Like if you had a notebook that had all that stuff and somebody else wanted to play around. I mean, no one should, for all the reasons you indicated.
If someone asked me, hey, if you were dissatisfied with any of your team's picks, can you give me what your strategy would have been? Like, let's say we don't do round 1 or round 2, because I mean, I'm happy with what the Vikings did in round 2. But like, for me anyway, we're not going to do round 1, round 2 for me. I think the Vikings were right. But like, if we did round 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for you, and the Vikings have the picks they have, so all the trades that happened had happened, what would you do? I would consider writing them my response. And then if they had said, yeah, I'm gathering it for all of the draft nicks, I would be very suspicious of their ability to actually gather like 30 different evaluations of what people's teams did and how they would have done better in terms of the pick percentages or the picks that they would have made. But I would contribute to that project, but I certainly wouldn't want to be the guy like asking people to just get their work in.
Oh, come on. You don't want to chase people around for data sets?
How to do that for the draft. It's awful.
So having done the draft, you don't want to look back and basically redo it. I can appreciate that. Tommy Gunn writes in with, I guess, kind of a combined question. What are the most worrisome draft picks from the rest of the NFC North? And can we just take a minute and laugh at the Bears?
Yeah, let's take a minute and laugh at the Bears. That was terrible. I can't believe. Jeez. They traded up for no reason, because like there's a lot of reports out there saying that the San Francisco 49ers are not competing with anybody for that second round spot. So the Bears traded up for no reason to grab a quarterback that was going to be there at number 3, who is not that good and should have been drafted like number 8 or 10 or whatever. And then they screw up like almost every other pick too. Like every other pick they made was like negative value. Whatever. Other than the Bears, I would say that the Packers had an all right draft. So I thought Kevin King and Josh Jones made a lot of sense. I think that Kevin King was kind of overrated by the draft community, and so the consensus board, made that a positive value pick. I think that's maybe an appropriate value. He's tall, he's athletic, but I think he's got a lot of issues in press. A lot of people say he's a press cover corner, which is like, yeah, that's his ideal usage if he learns how to do it. But he like wasn't that good at it at Washington. Josh Jones is a guy that I wanted the Vikings to get. He's very good. Montravius Adams, a guy I didn't like at all. at Auburn. Vince Biegel is a guy that the guys that watch edge players, people like John Owning at FanRake Sports, Justice Mosqueda, who we've had on the show a bunch of times, Charles McDonald, those people all really like Vince Biegel a lot. So I'll trust them. I think that's a good pick. Jamal Williams, not a great pick. D'Angelo Yancey, not a great pick. Aaron Jones, okay pick. The next three people, whatever. I mean, there's 6th and 7th round picks. I think they were bad for 6th and 7th round picks, but who cares? So I thought the Packers generally had a pretty good draft. I'm most worried about, I guess, Vince Biegel, because he's a 2nd round quality player drafted in the 4th round. And I think that Josh Jones is going to be good for them for a while. The Detroit Lions, I thought, made a bunch of bad picks. I thought Tease Tabor was a bad pick. I thought Kenny Golladay was a bad pick. I thought Jalen Reeves-Maybin was a bad pick. I thought Jared Davis was the worst pick out of all of them. They drafted the 2nd best linebacker at 21 when the best linebacker was still on the board, because I guess his P was diluted or whatever. Jamal Agnew was a bad pick. Jeremiah Ledbetter was a bad pick. Brad Kaya, I understand. Pat O'Connor was an all right pick, and Michael Roberts was an all right pick. So they made 3 all right picks and a bunch of bad ones. So yeah, I think the Vikings improved themselves the most relative to the NFC North with the draft by a lot, by a significant margin. It's like the Vikings moved down a rank or two, Green Bay Packers moved down a ton of ranks, the Detroit Lions moved down to the very bottom, Chicago Bears.
Well, we managed to not waste, not just because we didn't have one, but we managed to not waste our 1st round pick or a bunch of the trade value that came along with it.
It depends on what you think of Sam Bradford, but yeah, I agree.
Michael writes in, are the Bears or the Jaguars more poorly run?
I have to say the Bears. The Jaguars are at least cohesive and they have an understanding of what they want. I think the problem with the Jaguars is just that they didn't have talent on defense and a competent quarterback on offense. But I think that they continuously pick up really good, really interesting, really, schematically sound players for what they want to do on both offense and defense. And I think it's going to turn out, especially once they get their quarterback. So I think that they're better run because I think they continuously get better talent than the Bears do right now. Also, there's cohesion. So the coaches and the front office communicate with each other, and that's good. That's it. The Bears, that evidently is not a thing that they do. The head coach was not aware that they were going to be targeting Trubisky and was particularly not aware that they were going to be willing to trade up to target Trubisky. And it sounds like the head coach didn't even have Trubisky as his top quarterback. And wasn't aware. So it's one thing to have a coach and a GM disagree on who the top quarterback is. That happens. It's another thing to not tell them that the person you disagreed on is the person we're aggressively targeting or whatever. It even shows up on the video that the Bears released of the Bears calling Mitch Trubisky. It's clear John Fox is not excited.
Yeah, that an unfortunate organizational breakdown.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Jaguars haven't done anything like that lately. I guess you could argue that, re-signing Blake Bortles is suboptimal, but really, what are they going to do? You're right. They got a scheme. Maybe they want bad things, but at least they're consistent with what they want.
Right. And then also, I think Kaepernick is visiting the Jaguars. I'm not sure yet. But also, I think you've got Allen Robinson, you've got Allen Hurns, you got Marquise Lee. Between Hurns and Lee, one of them is good. We don't know who yet because one was good one year, one was good the other year. But you've got a decent offensive setup. I'm not a fan of the Leonard Fournette pick, but you know what you're going to do with him, and you know that he's got a level of talent that'll match what you want to do. I think that defensively, they're really setting themselves up for a lot of success with Jalen Ramsey, and then I guess Miles Jack is actually going to see the field as a starting because they've finally gotten rid of friggin' Paul Posluszny, or at least his role. I don't know if they cut him, but they're cutting back on the stuff that he's going to do. Telvin Smith is very talented, and they're figuring out the front four situation, not amazingly, but well enough that there's stuff to be had there that I think it's going to be exciting to watch. So I think that the Bears are more poorly run just because they're doing a poorer job of acquiring talent to help the guy out. At least Ryan Pace is so far. I guess previous Bears regimes did at some point acquire Alshon Jeffrey, who they just let go. to another team. But they acquired Jordan Howard, which is cool. They acquired Kyle Long in a previous regime. That was nice. But I think for the most part, Ryan Pace's short stint has been disappointing.
Mitchell Kane V on Twitter writes in with the big question: over under on Teddy coming back. When? Ever?
The over under has to be like a time, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Game 7.
Yeah, I'm gonna go over game 8 or game 9.
Okay. That stands to reason. I don't know. You get the impression that's kind of what the front office was thinking when they declined Teddy's 5th-year option, but maybe not. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll see.
This has been your rampant speculation.
We're so irresponsible on this podcast.
Yeah, right. James takes a moment out of his busy day arguing with Ted and Eric on Twitter to send in a couple of questions. Adrian Peterson has not yet taken out a full-page ad in the Strib. Why not? And does this disqualify him from being in the Hall of Fame / Ring of Honor?
Answer: he's scared, and also yes.
So if he untucks his tail from between his legs, will if he mans up, will that make him a Ring of Honor candidate once again?
Yes, I think so. I think he needs to. So what do you think the full page ad would say? Right? Is it screw you, or is it thank you for everything you've done for me in my time here? You're the best fans, except for the Saints fans, who I'm just going to see right now anyway, who are also now the best fans. Like what?
My guess,
like a huge FU.
My guess is it is a full page ad where you see him like on a camel, like riding off into the sunset. Like you only see him from the back. And he doesn't say anything about the fans. He doesn't say anything about Minnesota. He just thanks all the people who believed in him throughout his career and promises to impress them in New Orleans.
Oh, that would be perfectly tone deaf. That's amazing.
Something that's incredibly tone deaf and self-serving that just like glosses over the entire like Vikings fan community.
I like it, especially because it's got like inside of it, it's got kind of a small jab. Like the people who hated me because I beat a child, they didn't believe in me, and so I'm not thanking you guys. I'm thanking the people who believed in me.
Exactly. It's like a PR whitewash. Jealous haters can suck it.
That's good. You should do all full page ads for all athletes now.
I would love to. That would be my dream job. It's writing passive aggressive full page ads for athletes. Oh man, I would love to. You know whose letter I would love to write is Carmelo Anthony's to New York.
Oh my God,
that would be a lot of fun. James goes on to ask, sweet or spicy General Tso's chicken?
I mean, it's usually sweet. I guess I'd prefer it spicy. I know, it's General Tso's, like, who cares?
Yeah, that's General Tso is not even the best Chinese chicken. I'd say it's far from it.
Do you prefer? Well, what's the best Chinese chicken? And then I'm going to ask you unrelated question about Chinese chicken.
Oh boy, probably whatever the one that's like the it's like crispy chicken, but there's also like egg yolk. It's like mother and daughter or something, mother and child. That one's pretty good, but honestly, like dry pot Szechuan chicken is just the best. Like dry fry with all the chilies and like the Szechuan peppercorns, like just all that crispy chicken skin. And you know, I'm down with chicken that has little bones in it too. Like that, I enjoy the challenge.
All right, so now back into the category of chickens that could have been General Tso's chicken. So like crispy breaded fried chicken that are now no longer crispy because they've been dunked in a sauce. Because screw you, I guess. Do you prefer sesame, orange, or General Tso?
Ooh, sesame.
All right.
Every day of the week and twice on Sunday.
there another question or?
Well, I was waiting for you to explain to me why I was wrong, but I guess I'll just wait for Twitter to do it.
But I mean, I don't have a strong. I think I prefer sesame. So
Yeah, I mean, orange is too sweet.
yeah, I kind of agree on that.
I would put General So in number 2.
I like orange sauce on crispy duck,
Yeah,
but not like soaking it to the same degree that orange chicken sauce does to orange chicken.
Yeah, PF Chang's is overrated.
I'm gonna invite some Twitter hate.
I'm trying. They're not giving me much to work with.
The Charter social media account's gonna hate you. That's for sure.
that's I'm okay with that. Judd Zolgad's hoodie writes in with a couple of questions. Your early choice for Mr. Mankato.
Oh man, can it be Isaac Frichte? I feel like now every Mr. Mankato is like some version of Adam Thielen. But who was Mr. Mankato last year? Was it J-Ron Curse?
I think so.
Are we looking it up?
As I type away. I'm out of Star Tribune articles. I hate paywalls. They're the worst.
It is... Okay. I have to scroll through like a bunch of... Oh, it's David Morgan. Of course it was David Morgan. Yeah, that makes sense. So what are our options for... It has to be a late round pick, but it doesn't have to be a guy who was picked that year, right? Because he could be, a practice squad guy or something.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be Rodney Adams or Stacey Coley. It's usually a skill position player. That's the biggest problem. It could be Bucky Hodges. I could see that. I can't see a cornerback or a safety doing it. That's tough. I'm going to go with Bucky Hodges, although I will argue that if one of those like late defensive ends, like the undrafted guys that we mentioned, like Caleb Kidder or Tyus Bauer or not Tyus, I better get this right, Tayshaun Bauer or Ifedi Odenigbo. If one of those guys ends up producing a lot, I think that they might deserve Mr. Mankato, but they won't get it. It'll be Bucky Hodges. That's my guess.
I'm going to go with Drew Wolodarski, just because he's from Minnesota.
He's a tryout, though. He has to make the undrafted thing.
Yeah.
Fine.
It's probably Bucky Hodges.
In our Cold Omaha meeting today, actually, Brandon Warren suggested that there's like an evolution chart, like the ape to human evolution chart. And it goes Drew Wolodarski, Isaac Frichte, Adam Thielen, and then we were trying to figure out who the end would result. It's Wayne Grabett from the New York Jets.
All right.
It's your undrafted white wide receiver evolution chart. And Drew Wolodarski right now is like one of those baby Pokemon.
He's
like,
proto receiver.
Yeah. And then you've got practice squad white receiver Isaac Frichte, starting white receiver Adam Thielen, hometown legend white receiver Wayne Grabett. So, yeah, it's a Pokemon chart.
Baby Pokemon Drew Wolodarski. I like that. That's how I'll refer to him in the unlikely event that we hear any more about him other than when he gets cut. Would you eat a pizza stuffed in a burger stuffed in a pizza? Yeah.
Hoodie sent a video a while back.
It's like a giant burger with frozen pizzas for the bun.
Yeah, the frozen pizza, but inside the burger is a smaller pizza.
Like the burger ate a pizza?
Yeah, and so it's just this giant burger that they had to like bake in an oven.
I don't understand why you wouldn't like put the top pizza like crust out so it could actually be eaten like a sandwich. Although
I was thinking too, but you're not going to eat it like a sandwich anyway.
No, at that point it's basically just like a giant horrible frozen food lasagna.
Exactly.
What summer movie are you looking forward to most?
What summer movies are there?
Well, I wanted Justice League but that's not going to be out until like November. There's a new Spider-Man movie,
Possibly
Guardians of the
be
Galaxy
looking
2.
forward to a movie in the DC universe.
The new Alien movie looks pretty good, but I tell you, I'm looking forward to Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets because I love Luc Besson movies. And this looks to be a sci-fi thriller in the same vein as Fifth Element, which I enjoyed very much.
Oh my God, there's going to be a Pirates movie? Jesus Christ. Let it go.
Yeah,
another
one.
If I think that the one shot DC has at producing an interesting movie would be Wonder Woman. So I might be looking forward to that.
You're really not excited about the new Spider-Man movie?
I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of opportunity for it to be amazing and a lot of opportunity for it to be like overhyped. So like the thing is, Spider-Man was amazing in Captain America Civil War. I don't know if you can like do that for a movie, like a whole movie. You know, it's like the joke is he doesn't know what Star Wars is. That's hilarious. And he's like just this fanboy just has to deal with all these heroes random. Can you do that for like a whole 120 minutes or however long the movie is going to be? I don't know. I guess I'm also excited for it. Has all these movies that are like real movies that are serious and stuff. I'm not looking forward to Death Note. Jesus.
Making a Death Note movie? Or is it a Japanese movie that they're just like releasing in America?
I see a white guy.
Oh.
And I see another guy in shadows standing on or sitting on a chair with his feet on the chair, just kind of like the detective in the anime. So I'm pretty sure it's based off the. Yep. It's based off the anime. The adaptation of the Japanese manga animation has a horrific-looking monster that hunts down and kills. Horrific-looking what? That hunts down and kills anyone whose name appears in a specific notebook. I think that the person summarizing this movie has not seen Death Note.
It could just be a weird adaptation. You never know.
Oh, that would be the worst.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to see that.
Yeah, so I'm just going to choose that. So you can choose your artsy Valerian in the City of a Thousand Planets or whatever. I'm going to choose Selling Out. I don't know. I can't be that excited for Wonder Woman. And I just shat on Spider-Man a lot.
There's always Cars 3.
Nope. Alien Covenant. I'm going with Alien Covenant.
Ooh, yeah. Oh, I could definitely. So this is a sequel. So is this another prequel? This is a sequel to Prometheus, right?
Let's see. I'm reading the Collider.com. So I Googled summer movies. That's how I came up with this list. No matter how many times the franchise leads me astray, a new Alien film will always have my eager attention. After the visually splendid but narratively underwhelming Prometheus and coming off a solid win with The Martian, Ridley Scott is sending us back to space once again with the intent to return to his horror roots and explore the origin of the xenomorph. Picking up with Fassbender's David after the events of Prometheus, Covenant fashions the synth. So I guess it is a sequel. Covenant fashions the synth in the model of Dr. Moreau as he continues his human hybrid experiments on the engineer home planet. That's where, in classic alien fashion, the ill-fated crew of the Covenant responds to a distress call and stumbles upon a deadly extraterrestrial nightmare.
You need to change your EQ for when you do the the movie guy voice. Maybe like take up smoking. It's not gravelly enough.
I'm sorry. I'll work on it.
That's fine. You've done an awful lot of talking. Actually, not that much talking. You managed to be fairly concise this episode. However, that is pretty much it for our personnel review, such as it is. Do you have any final topics you want to touch on before we adjourn for the week?
Yeah, I wrote a lot of stuff at zonecoverage.com. Head over there. I think if you just go to zonecoverage.com/author/A Hassan, 1S, you can see all the stuff I've written. I think that's the URL to the author page. But yeah, I wrote like 24 articles over the past like 5 days. Please read it.
Read all of them. Get the detailed, nuanced takes you can only get from Minnesota Vikings blogger extraordinaire Arif Hassan. And yeah, I guess that'll do it for this episode of Norse Code. I don't know if something interesting happens. I guess we'll be back next week. Maybe we can get a guest and talk about something. I don't really know what. This is kind of a sleepy time for football.
Yeah, if interesting news happens, I don't know, maybe someone else blows up. Instead of Teddy, it's Dalvin Cook. Wow, is that jinxing? Am I jinxing?
Why did you do that? Why did you do that? I'm gonna contemplate editing that out and then not do it. That's we're gonna leave that in as a low content hot take, and I guess we'll be back next week. Is our formula that we're only a little below average? Is that by default?
Literally no one has emailed us or tweeted us with a better, different formula. So that's it. Yes.
Well, then we are Norse Code, and we are only a little bit below average. We'll see you next time. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, or wherever else fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, who can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. Our intrepid producer and occasional co-host James Pagachnik can be found on Twitter at Big Mono or curating the official Norse Code Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. I'm your host with a firm grasp of the obvious, Dusty O'Connell, and my name is my handle on Twitter. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, your one-time donation can be made at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Please visit our website, norsecodepodcast.com, where you'll find links to our Facebook and YouTube pages, along with the episode archive and some other good stuff. And any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be emailed to norsecodepodcast.com. On behalf of James and Arif, my name is Dusty, and we all thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.